everyone. How's everyone doing on this? Well, at least here in Chicago, it's kind of a gloomy day, but it's okay. You know, it could be worse. It's okay. But I hope everyone's having a good weekend. I hope you're doing a lot of things that you want to do. Hope that you're doing a lot of things that you want to do. I just want to say I have a guest today, and you guys are going to be really shocked, particularly women or men that have had a female boss. And the reason why her book was so appealing to me, because her book is going to be talking about women in the workplace, specifically Black women in the workplace, and how they can, balance being an up and coming leader in the workplace and also be Christian. So we're going to talk to her. But I'm excited. The guest is an HR professional and a certified master life coach. She's also written a book. The exact title of the book is Women in Leadership, Fulfilling God's Agenda While Navigating the Workplace. Now, this woman she's going to give us some nuggets tonight. So I'm looking so forward to her insight and lively discussion. Every show I start off with a scripture. For today, I'm going to talk about money. Of course, because we're talking about Black women leaders and them balancing being a Christian. So I got to talk about money because people think oftentimes that leaders are in it basically for greed or for prominence or for whatever, but perhaps not. Perhaps they're doing it and they're pouring into people while they're doing it. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, it goes, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." When I was young, that scripture read a little different. It read, money is the root of all evil. And we were raised up thinking, money is the root of all evil. So if I have a lot of money, am I being evil? Well, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, and that was clearly false. The Bible makes it quite clear that sin is the root of all evil in the world, not money, sin. However, when we reflect upon the correct citation of this verse, we see that it is a love of money, not money itself, that is a source of all different kinds of trouble and evil. Wealth, you see, and money is morally neutral. There's nothing wrong with money, nothing wrong with having money or possessing money. However, when money begins to control us, that's when the trouble starts. In the scripture, Paul just wanted to steer Timothy away from a trap, the trap that so many of us see today, the trap of false prophets that wrap doctrine for greedy gain and do what they do for fame, notoriety, and financial wealth. That's when they get into trouble. Now we're going to skip right to the News You Can Use segment, and only because I'm so excited about talking with our guests this evening. So here we go. Willard Scott passed away. He was stable in our local NBC market as a weatherman. That smile will be missed. We've all heard about the passing of Nene League's husband, Greg. He was on Housewives of Atlanta, and he appeared to be a good guy. Chicago expressways are still hot with 4 highway shootings this week alone. Good news, Jackie Jackson, Jesse's wife, is out of the hospital. 2 programs, one that provides jobless aid to self-employed and gig workers, the other to people who've been unemployed for more than 6 months, will expire on Monday. As a result, 8.9 million people will lose weekly benefit payments, according to an estimate by Oxford Economics. An additional 2.1 million people will lose a $300 a week federal supplemental unemployment payment, which also expires on Monday. These recipients will, however, continue to receive state unemployment benefits if they're within their 6 months. President Joe Biden says he's launching a federal effort to respond to the new Texas abortion law. The state's abortion providers are turning away patients following the new law, which bans abortions after 6 weeks. The COVID numbers are still going the wrong way. More than 39 million Americans have been diagnosed with COVID since the pandemic started last year. And that's our quick news that you can use. Now we're going to talk about our special guest today. Oh my gosh. Our special guest today is Mary Finch. Mary Finch, MBA, is a devoted human resources professional and certified master life coach who has applied her employment relation skills, conflict resolution, organizational management, and study in organizational psychology for 20 plus years in this field. Mary feels most accomplished by serving and supporting others to progress and obtain their growth potential. Mary is an active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. As an African American woman born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, Mary prides herself on creating safe spaces and inclusive environments that allow for awareness in the workplace and the community through the lens of diversity and inclusion. Mary is a published author of Women in Leadership, Fulfilling God's Agenda While Navigating the Workplace. Mary is supportive of women empowerment, leadership, and an ambassador to promote change with empathy in the way people work, act, and respond. Her commitment and dedication is reflected in her most recent experience as a certified change management practitioner. Help me welcome the MBA, AKA author, ambassador, human resources professional, and certified change management practitioner, Mary Finch.
Hi, Janice. How are you?
Why are you laughing? That's you, girl.
I love it. I was just smiling the whole time. So, first and foremost, thank you for having me on your show.
Oh my gosh, you are so accomplished, and we're not even really talking about you do a whole lot of other things. We only got a half-hour show, unfortunately, so we have to focus on what you wanted to focus on today, and we're going to start off right away with the questions. And there's probably things that people want to know, and if they have questions, if you put it in the comments, if we have time, we'll try to have her address it. I'm going to start with the first question. As an HR professional, have you seen firsthand disparities in treatments of Black versus white professionals as it relates to salaries, treatment, and disciplinary actions?
Yeah. First and foremost, let me just say my opinion, the interview, my responses are all representative of myself, Mary Finch, and of my coaching business, Growth Consultants, and not any other entity. So I just want to be clear on that. For someone who's been in HR for such a period of time, not necessarily being a person that is the lead in HR, but just being an employee, yes, definitely I have seen disparities. Specifically disparities in just treatment kind of overall, I would say. Not necessarily it has to be specific with Black versus white, but there is sometimes a huge disparity against how managers are not prepared to be able to be managers or to coach and have unbiased opinions when it comes to performance and just relationships in general, right? So I think those things, and also within when I think about treatment as it relates to like discipline and making sure that there's an equal process for each employee that doesn't necessarily discriminate against how favorable they might feel about one person versus the other. And while it may be Black and white, sometimes it's not Black and white. Sometimes it's just it can be within age, it can be within sexual orientation. So there is an unfairness when it comes to difference in a workplace at times. And some it's just not as apparent to people.
Mm-hmm.
Some is apparent to them, but I would say yes, absolutely, I have seen it.
Okay, yeah, I guess people have their own biases and they bring that to the workplace. So that's, as an African American female professional, do you think there is some merit when people say, I don't want a Black female manager? And I'm going to expand on that, okay? Because as a Black female, most of us in the workplace have had different managers. Some of us have had bad experiences with Black female managers. Perhaps our hopes are up too high, and we're thinking because they're a Black female and they're like us that, we're going to have this camaraderie. Maybe that's it. But do you think there's any merit to that statement? I don't want a Black female manager.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I don't think that there's any merit to it, honestly. Okay. I think it's just based on someone's independent experience. And sometimes if they've had a Black manager and they've noticed a trend of, I don't know, whatever that experience might be, they might associate that with that type, right? So it might be that woman, or it might be women in general, and it might be, attached to that Black woman. But as a Black woman, being in leadership and being a part of, organizations that I'm seeing professional women that I've chosen to be a part of, I would be doing myself a disjustice to be able to say that I think that there's merit to that. Women are nurturers, women are professional, they're educated, and there's so many different complexities to being a Black woman that it's just not a fair statement to be able to make. At the end of the day, I think that people need to understand that people are people, and we don't need to always look to be relatable because we are within the same race. More so, like you're in the workplace, understand the job, understand if you need to manage whatever those tasks are, if you need to manage up, manage down, and try to be successful in that, opposed to trying to be the friend.
Those are good points. Good points. I know my ring goes up all the time too. Do you believe African American female professionals are subjected to more scrutiny than their white counterparts?
Um, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think that they are. I think that as I look back, and I think from when I first started, from like even undergrad, I can recall being told. I think at the time I had like braids, and I was getting ready to graduate from undergrad. And I remember someone in career services just telling me that because of the way that my hair was, that it was unprofessional. From that moment, it made me start to think about how I was appealing to someone else, needed to have my hair straight, or needed to have a particular way that I just looked to be able to kind of fit in or to fit the job, right? Present day, obviously, I have sister locks, right? So all of that has gone out the window. But that really set the tone for me to think that if I didn't look a certain way, then I wouldn't be accepted. So I think that there is still maybe a mindset of you need to look a certain way in the workplace. And it depends on what that job is. I mean, I work in advertisement, and those that might have creative backgrounds, like it's more acceptable to be different and to be your authentic self than in the past when you had to look a certain way. So possibly so. I think another thing is, in the workplace, some African Americans feel like they need to code switch, right? So you need to sound a certain way. And I pride myself on, I look how I look, I sound how I sound. If I didn't look this way, if I didn't sound this way, if I haven't experienced the things that I have experienced, I wouldn't be here today. So there's no need for me to be a different person than who I am. Everybody does not think that way.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, because I know when you're relatively young, but when I think about 20 years ago in the workplace, a lot of frontline employees or banking or finance industries, some industries, they didn't want the braids and they didn't want maybe a pierced nose, or they didn't want certain things. And yeah, things have changed a lot, particularly recently. But 10, 20 years ago, it was like that. They would tell you to straighten the hair for an interview, straighten the hair when you go to even now, you may hear it even though it's not really needed. But and to your point, creatives, yeah, they definitely have much more flexibility, even in how they dress. But when I think about dress now, no one wears suits and no one's dressing now. So things have changed. But you made an excellent point. The next question: in your quest to create safe places and inclusive environments through the lens of diversity and inclusion, have you seen a shift? And do you believe this is needed now more than ever because of the current racial environment?
I think it's always been needed. I think
Okay.
that present day, different groups feel more open to be able to express themselves more freely than they have in the past. But if we look like just over a period of time, we've always have had moments, or just minutes in time or moments in time, that has changed us from just the evolution of like where we are now. If we didn't have what happened just a couple of years ago, without being specific, and people being able to see what they have saw, to hear what they have heard, they couldn't unsee it, they couldn't unhear it, and it's open conversations for more awareness and more conversations around DEI. So there's been a huge uptick now around diversity and inclusion that wouldn't have been a conversation even if we look back 5 years, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think that the conversations there's always been these moments where, we've had some significant thing that has happened that opened the conversation. And then we just continue to move as the evolution of the world. I do think that there will be more things that will happen that will open the discussion even more. But I'm proud to say I'm glad that diversity and inclusion um, has been kind of a conversation that everybody wants to hear about, that, people are thinking about how to be more inclusive. Um, in the past, I would think that it was kind of more, when you think about employees and people being hired, it was based on like quota, just making sure that you had
Right.
enough of Black people or Hispanic people and etc. And I think that even like what's happened within the African American community, it has opened up for even those that are associated with pride for sexual orientation now feel like they have a voice and they can be open and free. So I'm, so yeah, now is the time, but the time has been like, these aren't new things that have happened. These are like a continuous trend of things that have happened throughout our history. And I'm glad that now there's a voice and people are actually listening to, as a Black female, to what is important to us to make sure that it's represented in the workplace. And when you talk about like creating those spaces, there was a period of time where I was the only African American person in the workplace. And being in a position that I was in at that time of creating that space, it wasn't a, it was more of a, not necessarily responsibility, but it was like my obligation. I felt to be able to make sure that there was diverse people in the workplace besides myself being African American, and allowing them to be able to have a voice, and not just having a voice, but also for actionable items, right? So let's demonstrate how we want those things to play out in our workplace, not just be seen, not talk about what we want to see, but actually be the change that we wanted to see. So, so yeah, to answer your question, I probably just rambled that a lot.
No,
But
you did. No, no.
I definitely feel like there is a need now, but there's always been a need, and I pray that it continues to be something that people want to listen to, so that we can have a voice.
Okay. So that everyone can have a voice, in fact. Yeah.
So that everybody can have a voice. Agreed.
Now, this question is probably very elementary to you, but I didn't know what it was. So maybe you can educate not only me, but anybody else who don't know. What is a certified change management practitioner?
It is a little nice, nifty name just to say that I am certified to be able um, to help strategize, create, develop strategies to encourage managers through new initiatives. So that's any kind of change that they want to see in a workplace. I'm certified enough to take them through the process of change management, and it starts at the top. So whatever that change is that needs to happen in the organization, I basically coach towards that initiative.
Like a certified change agent. Do you have to take a test for
Right.
it?
You don't have to take a test for it.
Okay.
It's like a 3-day training that you have to take. Actually, you do. At the end of it, there is like a little quiz that you have to take after you go through this 3-day training. So yes,
Okay. So
I'm
it's
certified.
kind of in a sort of like a Six Sigma, but kind of condensed. Like, okay. Oh,
Correct.
change agent. That's interesting. Have your experience and academic background led you to writing your book on a leadership guide for Christian women? Is it because you're an MBA and you've been in HR and you see all this and you thought, let me write this book?
That's a really good question. The guide was created during COVID. I had the thought prior to COVID, but during COVID, when there were so many different changes and just feeling like of lack of security, I needed to personally, just being vulnerable, I just needed to create something that was mine. And for me, putting something pen to paper, creating a book was like creating my own legacy. But throughout that, as I started to reflect during COVID, um, to answer your question, yes, everything that I have in me led me to write this guide. So not just like my academic background, but the experiences that I had throughout my period of life up until present um, encouraged me to be able to write that guide.
How long did it take you to write it? Since you only started writing it since COVID, how long did it take you to write the book?
I got it published during COVID, so it took me maybe like 4 months.
Really?
Yeah, it's a guide. So yeah, it took me about 4 months to put it together. And what was interesting about that is I had a different idea that I wanted to write something about, and it was more was more personal. And I thought to myself, no, I'm not ready for that one quite yet. So then I started thinking about, as again, just kind of reflecting on really how blessed that I have been, because through all of that, there's different things that could have happened that did not happen. And I got missed in those things. And I just wanted to, I wanted to be able to share it, because the guy, while it's about, women in leadership, the ultimate conversation out of that book was to focus on God. So that was my way of talking about women in leadership, but also having a subliminal message that there's a repetitive message in here. And that was just basically about God, because if I didn't have him, honestly, I just don't know. I don't know how things would be even present day. So I was just thankful during that period that nothing was missed. Nothing was missed. Not a meal, not a bill, not anything. So I was just, and being in HR and being a part of those discussions where I was letting people go, several people go, over 200 people, just having to let them go. You take that piece with you. I'm not a robot, so you take that with you, and you think about, while it's not necessarily your decision and you're having the conversations, it still has an impact on you.
Right. Wow.
So yeah, so all of that was in me when I wrote the book.
That was quick. As a female climbing the ladder, how does one temper their ambition so it doesn't turn into greed?
Say that last part again. How do you temper your ambition to what?
So it doesn't turn into greed.
I think those are two different things, honestly, right? So when I think about like temper my ambition, I would never encourage anybody to temper themselves if they are ambitious. If I wasn't ambitious and seeking higher things,
right,
I wouldn't be able to move the way that I've been able to move. Now, the greed, that's a whole different conversation. Some people have not had certain things, and when they've gotten certain things, they didn't know how to handle it, right? But that's never been, I'm kind of the secret squirrel, so I've always been private about my entire life. Nobody knows anything I don't want them to know. But I would say that those are really two different things, right? How do you deal with greed? It's almost like, how do you deal with an addiction? So that's a different type of conditioning, a different type of intervention. But someone that needs to be ambitious, especially being a Black woman myself, I would never tell them to temper that. I think there is a difference between being humble, being a listener, encourage people to not kind of know it all, but just ask questions along the way in that ambition so that they can grow. But again, two very different things. If you are ambitious, continue to be ambitious because that's what's going to fuel you to be able to thrust yourself forward.
Okay. Because oftentimes people think that when you're too ambitious, that will turn into greed, and you're doing something that's potentially not legal or doing something to get a lot of money. They kind of put those two together. That's why the question was posed.
I think that if someone has that mindset, then that's what they're aiming for, because you usually don't just get there. You usually already have that just kind of in you. So, that's just me. That's just an assumption that I'm making. But I don't have a clear answer on that one. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Someone that just hasn't thought like that, like just being greedy.
Oh, that's what I think like that. Well,
yeah, no, I never thought to tie those two together. But when you say it, I guess I can see the correlation between the two. Just wanting more and continue to
wanting more and doing whatever it takes to get it.
Yeah.
Anything brought before you. So
that's when integrity kicks in.
Well, yeah, but that's true. Absolutely. If they have integrity. Is the challenge of living a Christian life and adhering to the goals of a company difficult?
It's not difficult for me. I've had to pray my way out of a lot of situations. In full honesty, and when I say a lot of situations, as far as how I respond, how I respond to things. And, it's not until you get in situations where you need to call on God is when you understand, I don't know, let's just say this. When, any meeting that I need to step into, that I have an audience, this conversation today, I prayed before I had the conversation, because I want people to be able to receive me in the way that you see more than just me, but you see God. So for me, in being in those spaces that I have been in, and not necessarily being comfortable in certain spaces and not knowing how to respond, and wanting to be appropriate and being very cautious, I've learned to be able to just really put God first and just pray my way through it. So I am who I am. And I hope that people are able to receive me, but if they are not, I'm okay with that too. Let's just
Right.
say.
Because you are who you are. I am.
I am who I am. I used to, in one of my roles, I used to have this calendar. And this calendar that I used to keep on my desk, it had like the scriptures correlated with the days. So
Okay.
when people would come in my office, they would come in, they would sit down. The first thing they would grab is the calendar, because it was just there. And it was just interesting how those that might not have an interest in the same thing that I have an interest in, they now were starting to read that. They
Ah,
got accustomed to it, and it almost became like this kind of conditioning thing, because they were reading the scriptures like, oh, what does it say today? Because they got so used to, like, just seeing it. So I think that when you are, and I continue to say, being your authentic self, there's a way for you to still be you and not necessarily impose your thoughts on other people, where they feel uncomfortable, to a point that they see you and they're comfortable. So that was my way of doing that.
okay. You mentioned leadership types in the book. Can you identify some of those leadership types?
Yes, I actually had to pull some of this up. I was like, oh my God, let me recall this. Um, but yeah, so I do recall now that I'm taking a look at some of it. Let me just say, when I look at the first topic, or the first intro into the book, it talks about the great I am. And while that's not necessarily like a personality type, it was my way of encouraging people to say, like, hey, who you are is because it's not the I in you, it's the God in you, right? So that's how I started my intro of my book. But other topics, just to talk about, I have the spiritual leader. So it's the person that, um, morning, lunch, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, is praying, right? Is praying throughout the day, and is still being able to be a leader, but just being just spiritual. So it basically talks about, if that's you, if you're that person, just continue to put God first, continue to be the best you. So it's more of an encouragement than it is talking about like a certain characteristic. And through the book, with the different personality types that I talk about, someone could identify with one or more of those characteristics or those personalities.
Mm.
Another person is like Miss Know It All. While that might come off as, it could come off as, kind of a negative thing when you think about that. But some people have been positioned where they felt like they had to be in spaces where they knew it all to be a part of the conversations or being at the table. So, basically in that chapter, I'm just saying, like, if you identify as being a Miss Know It All because you felt like you've had to be in those spaces before, just understand that God knows it all. Like, you don't have to, you don't have to be the fill-in to feel like you know everything, and misspeaking sometimes against things that you really don't know, to be a part of the conversations. Um, and then another, just to talk about one more, it's just leading from the back. So it's talking about driving connections, that every leader is not in the forefront. Every leader is not the person that you see, but there are so many people behind the background that are leading, driving the connections, running the operations, keeping the pieces together, that you just don't see. And I'm just saying, like, if you are that person and you want to be the forward leader, or you want to be the person in the front, God will position you to be that when you put your request before him. So that's just another thing to say, regardless of where you are, just like where you are at the table. Sometimes people think that the head of the table, the lead, is at the head of the table. I am one of those people that think that if I am the head and I am the lead, I don't care where at the table that I sit, I'm leading from that position. So that is, more so of what my book is about, not necessarily to talk about those characteristics or those personality types, but to say, if you identify with this one or more of these topics, just know that You know, God has a plan for you. Stay encouraged. Understand your gaps. This is like for you to understand whatever your backhand might be. Your backhand might be the weakness, right? So if there's a weakness or things that you feel like you need to be in order to be in certain spaces, just know that God has you.
All right. I'm going to just let Roger kick me off. This book is a guide for leaders. Does it address people who work for such leaders and give tips on how to handle those types of leaders and maintain a Christian life? Does it talk about the other side, not just the leaders, but the people who work for the leaders? Does it deal with them at all? Can they get something from this book?
Yeah, I think, even though it's a guide for, for women leaders, and everybody's right, they are leading something. And if you don't have leader necessarily in your title, doesn't mean that you aren't a leader. So yeah, it talks about like just understanding different leadership types, because honestly, what you can take away from this, if you're not in a leadership position,
Mm-hmm.
is not to be that type of person,
Right.
not to understand the gaps of, you don't have to be the Miss Know-It-All. You don't have to be the sister saving other sisters. You don't have to be, and if you are that type of person, just remember self-care is important. There's a last topic in there that talks about rebuilding you, and it's it's the part that talks about self-care and putting yourself first and taking time for yourself. So yes, if you are not a leader by title, but you are a leader in right, you definitely can get something out of this book.
Where can they get the book from? I know I'm going over, but that's okay. Where can I get the book from?
You can get it from Westbow Press. That's the site. That's actually the publishing company. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from Barnes and Nobles. I've even seen it on Target. So you can get it at all of those different platforms.
You're at Target too? Oh, good.
Yeah. I Googled and I was like, oh, it said Target also. So
wow.
Yeah, it said Target, but Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, and then the publishing company itself, Westbow Press.
Are you going to write a second book?
I collaborated on a book shortly after that, and I'm actually pulling that up too. So the second book that I collaborated on, I was one of 9 other authors, and the book is about change. So it's change management. Let me just move this back. It is mindset change, understanding how change works in the mind. So that is my second book. It's a collaborative book, and that also can be bought off of Amazon.
Okay. Do you do speaking engagements?
Not since COVID. I have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I do. I do a lot of speaking engagements, honestly, with in my profession with like colleges, because I want to prepare next generation leaders in order to, learn how to get like the path to kind of get into the workplace and professional and to be prepared. So I talk to them a lot about, just things that they need to know when interviewing and etc. After we get past this, hopefully, yes, some in-person speaking engagements, but anything virtual, absolutely.
Okay. Was writing the book therapeutic for you?
It definitely was. It was therapeutic. It made my nerves bad when it first went out, when I knew that it was going out, because I'm just such a cautious person and I left myself open for people to judge, right? Or to read or to misread, and being cautious like that just caused, my nerves to go bad. Like, oh my God, what would people think? And then after that, it was perfectly fine, but it was therapeutic to be able to do it. I'm not a writer. I'm someone who wrote, right? I wrote a book. So it's not something that I've, always done. I've always journaled for myself. So to be able to put my thoughts down onto paper, it absolutely was therapeutic. The most part was I'm an intentional speaker. So being an intentional speaker, I'm always I'm kind of prepping myself for what I want to say. Okay. I don't normally like be in a room and just like have these open conversations. I only speak when I feel like it's something that I need to speak towards. So it was definitely therapeutic, and it put me out there.
Wow.
In a good way, great way.
In a great way. And that's not even the tip of the iceberg of what Miss Finch is about. Yeah. But I want to thank you so much for coming on. I enjoyed talking to you. I could have talked longer. I'm glad we didn't get kicked off because I went over the time. I want you to stay on for a minute. But for right now, the show, it's after my time, and the show is going to be over. We'll be back next week at 7 p.m. And I want everyone to have a blessed week. And keep in mind, Miss Finch book can be brought, it sounds like, at every single outlet. Would you name them again before we go?
Thank you all.
Could you name the outlets? Amazon?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Amazon, it's Westboro Press, Target, and Barnes and Nobles.
And Barnes and Nobles. If you have any parting words for the audience, you can have at it.
If someone wants to contact me, can I just give my contact information?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sure. So if you want to contact me, you can send me an email. It's at M as in Mary. It's MSF. So it's Mary, S is in Sam, F is in Finch, growth consultants at gmail.com. So that's MSF growth consultants at gmail.com.
Okay, so that's MSF growth consultants at gmail.com.
Correct.
And there it is on the screen. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Everyone have a blessed week. See you next week at 7.
Camped out at home for COVID? Join us, Indie TV, where you will see the talk shows, movies, drama, action, and comedy. Be the first and see it first. Sign up now for free at Indie TV.